mic on.
Does it look like it's working? We're back. Who says that? Oh, that's JC. Hey, JC. Thanks for your review, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
So are they hearing us?
I hope so, or if not yet, they should soon. I don't know why that screen is still black.
Is it catching up? Sound is on. Thank you, Nova.
F7. Oh.
What is webcam 3?
Audio with black screen.
Did it? No. I think what happened is all the nice stuff that Lenny set up, when it crashed, it lost. Whoa.
Oh, all the mirrors. That's going to be awesome.
Oh, we have a picture.
Woohoo. Nope, they just get to see.
Woo. A tease.
There's F10. Thanks, that was a stream. JK, don't leave us. Well, snap. I don't know how to reset this up.
Stream within stream is pretty cool.
Somebody? Anybody?
It's pulsating.
Know how to set up the cam with the thing?
Maybe if all the people who aren't technical stand around, like threateningly, maybe it'll obey.
Maybe. Somehow supposed to come. It was just coming through this nice camera we have before the crash. Sorry, guys. This is what happens. Lenny left us.
Because of maintenance. That's right. No, but since you can hear us, but nothing's happening, you mentioned like cryptically about offering a prize for the costume contest. You want to like cryptically let me know what you had in mind? Hey, there we go. We got windows. Can we see that?
Okay, we want the hands to be the big screen, please. And thank you.
You want it to be a big screen? Okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the big screen.
For now.
And then we're supposed to be, our faces are the tiny screen.
Yeah, probably.
Because nobody needs to see me in full depth.
Okay, well I don't know why.
We're getting grayer and grayer. It's all this.
So you want this?
But that makes you look all like
big.
adventure-y. Oh.
Adventure-y? That's
like.
That's a good term. I like that.
You're welcome.
You want this one to be small.
Yeah, it's got to cover my mug.
There you go then. Okay, so
I don't know why.
That looks like it's working. And look, it's working over there too. So I think it's
working. Cat face.
Aaron,
That is
you
a
rocked
good
it.
thing. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. You saved the day. Saved the stream.
all right. So sorry for the slow start and everything else, but just technical stuff. And thank you for being here. This is Samantha, in case you're new to the stream, and I'm Chris. And just a kind of quick consolidation here on what's going on. We are currently working broadly on what we're calling the Vermin update, and that is where we're going to have 2 whole new levels coming into the game that provide that access to the vermin, to the rats, and kind of how they think and how they go about life. So the books often will kind of go back and forth between the woodlanders and the vermin, and you get to see both stories at once. So we're accomplishing that through these sort of interspersed levels that do that kind of thing. So when that releases, and I'm thinking, roughly the middle of October, give or take, we'll have 2 whole new levels that are basically a bunch of rat stuff, including some improvements to how rats work, to their aggro, to the AI, lots of stuff. With that in mind, we are also aiming towards what is tentatively called a Woodlander update, but at that time it would be an unknown date for that, so I'm not sure when that will happen because there's lots of things in play. And part of that is a cooking game, which we have talked about in the past, but we thought what we could do today is kind of show you a paper version of what we're working on for the folks who are into this. Some ideas about how the math works. A couple days ago, I posted a thing on Facebook. It was a link to a movie, or it might be a series on Netflix called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which is a cooking book. And at the center of that book is this notion that all cooking has these 4 notions in common. It's all the same, regardless of whether you're you know, in Africa, Australia, New Zealand, whatever, that between these four concepts, you get the same basic stuff, which is great because it transcends sort of the cultural thing. So good in a kind of a taste sense is very personal and very different, and things that you might think are good as a Norwegian are probably different from what people think is good, you know, in South Africa. So good becomes measurable in a real way, and not sort of culturally or memory dependent. So anyways, without going into how that game, Sammy and I are going to do some experimentation. And to be clear, just for expectations, this is not going to be a super visual thing. If you're kind of into the guts of it, that's what we're going to be talking about. And we'll probably be pretty short. Like, it's either going to work out the way we expect it to, or it's not. And that's why we're iterating. We're playing with this whole thing. It's at paper level. So did you have anything you wanted to say before I kind of get going?
Nope, except Nova did just ask what our favorite foods are.
Go ahead. Why don't you start?
Well, I personally love split pea soup. It's the first food I had that wasn't baby mush, and apparently back then I ate it like no tomorrow, and now I make Mom make it for me every birthday.
Right on. I think for me it's sausages. I love sausages and all manner of the things. So like in October, it's sausage knocked. Instead of spaghetti night, we just do sausage knocked. And I get like 15, 20 varieties, and they're just beautiful. So
Oktoberfest for the win. Poor Woodlanders are missing out by not having sausage. Unless they make fish sausage. Can we make fish sausage?
I don't know. You need fat to make sausage. You could mix it with fat. You could add fat, but it'd have to be like some other fat.
Yeah,
but
like
fish sausage, that's an
fat?
interesting.
I just don't know how they would have sausage in Redwall. But they
Maybe
have
they have leather.
Yeah.
So maybe
shark sausage.
Maybe the fleather tree, its fruit is like fleather on the outside and sausage on the inside.
I'm in. Yeah. No, I think that is exactly how it works.
Fantastic. Okay, here's what my suggestion is, Sam. Is that I'm going to pretend that you're a player.
Okay.
And I am the computer. And so I know how the game works and you don't.
All right.
And so we're going to pretend to we make this work. So say now that you are approaching Rootsworth's cooking thing and you have a variety of ingredients available in your inventory.
All right.
By the way, one of our big failures right now is we have no idea about how UI would work here. So we have to figure out how this works. But let's start with the notion that you have a bucket full of ingredients in your journal.
Gotcha.
What would you want to know and how should we proceed? Every ingredient you have, and I don't know if your spreadsheet is available.
Oh, yeah. It is.
So you have a number of raw ingredients. So you've got potatoes, carrots, celery, onions, mushrooms. You've got water. You've got salt. You've got a variety of spices. You'll see that spices are organized in their own section. So let's say you have rosemary, basil, and oregano. Let's just say. And you know what's in the food cart as much as anybody. So say you have those ingredients. Each of those ingredients is going to include a couple of statistics that you can see, which is how salty it is, how much it weighs per gill. A gill is actually a measurement from the medieval times, which we're equating to about a cup.
Okay.
So you know how many cups of onions you have, and you know how many, and you also know each thing how salty that thing is, how much water it contains, and how much fat and acid it contains, as well as any certain notes about like it's spicy, it's herby, whatever. So there will be a flavor chart that is reminiscent of your scenting chart. So it'll use the same visual language of colors and categories that go from like broad categories of spicy, say, that kind of trickle down. That's not really legible, but we'll say you have like you have a sweet category that corresponds to the four main tastes, right? So sweet can break down into fruity, or a word I can't read on this printout. What is that?
Flowery.
Flowery. Okay, so that could break down to that. Fruity further breaks down into berries, tropical, and rosacea. I think is how you pronounce that.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of rosy, I guess. Anyways, each of those would show kind of where that flies on the thing. And what would you do next?
Let's see. I'm imagining that I'd be able to see my ingredients, and I would see a soup pot, and I'd get to just start throwing ingredients in the soup pot.
Okay.
So like I collected my little recipe for hot root soup, which I am challenged and cannot share with the screen. Anyway, whatever. I as a
Brackety tam sausages. I didn't know that. I gotta look that up.
Yeah, I need to look that up. Because we have some models for hanging sausages we could start putting in like storage rooms. So, hot root soup, I think just based on real cooking knowledge, I would start with the like broth of the soup. So I'd put things like the vegetables and shrimp in first.
Okay. So let's start with water. So water has 0 salt, 0 fat, 0 acid. So, and so you want to figure out like how much you put in, right?
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
And so let's say you pick a number, and I don't know, we want to call it 8 cups.
Yes.
Okay.
8 gills of water. For
8 gills of water. Okay. So that also gives you an amount of volume, right? So that becomes, and then what else are you going to add?
All right. Well, let's see. 8 gills of water. Let's see. And this calls for 2, 4, 6, 8, 4 times. Then I'm going to put 12 green onions in there.
So try to estimate gills of 12 green onions. Are these like chives? Is that what you're thinking?
Probably, actually, because it calls for 3 green onions. So per gill. Never mind. I'm going to go quickly. There are 8 cups of shrimp and or fish are going in this. 8 gills.
8 gills of shrimp. Let's say it's shrimp. So that you have 8 cups of fish plus 8 cups of water.
No. 4. I did the math wrong. I'm an English major. I can't math that.
4 cups of shrimp. Okay, and we have this written down, but I'm going to imagine. So shrimp is going to be a little bit salty, and so we're going to call that. We're going to call it 10. And I can't remember the measurement here. 10 things of salt per cup, and so we're going to call it 40 for 4 cups. Okay. Fat, we're going to have shrimp's a little bit fatty, so let's call it 15, which will bring me up to I'm going to call it 20. I'm going to say 0 acid, and so that's what I have for those things. And then you said,
so my nice shrimp broth
onions?
Now is at.
Well, okay, so here's how we do it, right? So here's how. Let's just say those 2 ingredients as a start. So what we do is we take the overall volume of stuff, and so in this case we've got basically 12 cups, and we add up the salt, and so in that case it's 0 plus 40 is 40, and then we divide and we get a percentage. And so I don't have my calculation here, but I think we're going to wind up with something around thinking 4%, I'm guessing.
Sorry, what is the
So where's my mathing here? So
there's a calculator.
Okay, so if I've got 8.
Apple pie. Yes. Apple pie is good. So is pumpkin pie, guys. Pumpkin pie is the best of pies.
Okay, so if we do this right, then we're going to wind up with about 3% salinity.
Okay.
Okay? So your target for salinity is 2%.
Oh, so
anything
I'm
above that
super
is a little
salty.
too salty. Anything below that is a little too bland. But this is how you start, okay? Now,
So then magical cooking system, how do I balance the salinity?
if it's just salinity, water is your best friend, which is why soup is so easy. So you want to change the salinity, just add water.
Okay.
Add water, easy peasy, that's all it does.
So if I add some vegetables that have water content, does that add water to my
Yeah, but
soup?
not enough to matter.
Not enough to matter.
So, I mean, unless you're adding something like, frickin' watermelon or something, it won't add up enough.
Okay.
So, like, just flat out water is how you want to win here.
Okay. How much water do I add to get my
If you made it
ideal
12 cups instead of 4, you'd be
Okay.
fine.
12 cups.
So this changes salinity, and the same thing would work if you just reduce the amount of shrimp.
All right.
Okay. So let's say that's how we do it. We're going to calculate this down to 2% for your broth.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've got that. I also now have enough fat. So each time you add an ingredient, this math just compounds the same way. So you're adding more volume, more salt. So on just the salinity factor, that's how all it works. And by rules, oh look, see, milk and cream, very good. However, depending on what you're doing, then those may or may not add salt and or fat. Certainly milk and cream add fat. So where salt enhances flavor, and it's pretty yes or no. Like it's either bland, it's salty, or it's good. And kind of like right in that middle is that sweet spot you're doing, and it's almost entirely just it's just an entirety of a volume to amount of salt, easy peasy. Fat, on the other hand, is what carries flavor, and so what fat's, we're going to call this richness, and so we had to kind of combine a couple areas in this because fat works differently in different contexts, and so we had to really simplify that chemically. But its main part is it adds a richness and mouthfeel, and you're looking for about 20% fat in general. Certain dishes are going to be different, but as a rule. So if you started adding milk to this, you'll get volume, probably not any salt, but you will get fat, and that will make the thing feel richer. So that's the difference between like a chicken noodle soup, which doesn't have cream, or like a cream of chicken soup, right? So this is a thing.
Okay.
So you could, for example, milk would have water and cream, or water and fat. So if we stuck with 8 cups of water plus 4 cups of milk, then you have your cake and eat it too.
Excellent.
You reduce your salinity and you improve your richness. And so this probably goes up to around 15.
Yeah, so now it'll be a nice like hearty cream soup as opposed to being just fish water.
Creamy shrimp soup, that feels pretty good.
All right.
And so again, this is all math. Every ingredient just has a certain amount of these things. So what we said is 10% fat is about our goal. 5% is dry, 20% is fatty. And so that's probably a target that's going to be different on recipes because different people want more or less fat. But that's how we get into richness.
So does how much soup we make, are we going to be limited by how big our cook pot is, or do we get a theoretical multi-batch?
You will have, that's a good question. We have not accounted for the size of the vessel.
Okay.
We do account for volume per party member. So like this creates a certain amount of food, and you can only distribute it among so many people. So we do account for that. I have not thought about how big the pot is. Let's assume that Rootsworth pot is used to feeding all these people.
Yeah.
So that should be done.
I mean, that pot could fit an entire mouse easy.
Yes, I think easy. So the third thing here is acid. So acid is what balances flavor, and we're going to call this complexity. And so complexity is going to be the notion like, and if you've ever done this, like there's a notion in which when I add a little bit of vinegar or when I add a little bit of red cider or whatever like that, what it is often going to do is it's going to help blend together flavors that otherwise are spiky.
Okay.
And it also it's going to highlight flavors that you might otherwise have missed. So maybe the red pepper is just too loud and it blends out so you can't taste the fennel. So by adding just a little bit of acid, I can bring those two together, and I'm allowed to, it rolls it around my tongue in such a way that I get more flavor, more complexity to the thing.
So if I root around in Rootsworth tent, I can find some sherry to add to this?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah?
So
Excellent.
wine, sherry, vinegar, those are all perfect. Pickle juice, I mean, lives and dies on acid. So we're going to call that as acidity. And this is probably the one that right now, development-wise, I don't know what good acidity is. And so this is when I don't know how to measure for good, right? I just don't know. Up to this point, all it is simple math. I add everything up, I chunk out the math, and I just get these values, and I have targets for them.
All right.
So you can continue to go down this road and add more ingredients, add more stuff. What I haven't included yet is spices. So spices become a separate thing. Okay, so here's where, if we're gonna pretend we're Plato, the philosopher, not the dough.
Oh, okay.
then we are looking for a goal that things are good and beautiful and true. Like virtuous things are good and beautiful and true.
Okay.
What we've just described here is a question on whether or not it is good, which means like is it appropriately made? Okay. Or no, yeah. And so one of the things that we didn't really talk about here is that each ingredient also includes essentially whether or not it's junk food or not. So it's a question of caloric content. And is this actually food, or is it marshmallow? And marshmallow can taste really good, but it doesn't feed you. Like you can't, you can't really survive in the wilderness on marshmallow. But like a Cliff Bar tastes horrible. But you could probably live and die on the moon with Cliff Bars. So these two things are not the same, although ideally they come together. So if this math indicates sort of like whether or not it's good, beautiful is whether or not it's personal. So this is an objective system.
Okay.
But you'll notice that, like when you talk to Laban, he says, "Oh, I like rosemary." For him, that seasoning, that spice is personal to him. He likes it. This is beautiful to him. And so by providing flavors that don't change its caloric content, that don't change its salt or its fat, what you do is you make it personal to the person. And we're going to add an additional layer here that not only is it my preferences that matter in this food, there's also the notion of the company. The company matters. The relationship with the chef, the relationship with the other people at the table, those will highlight or diminish how a person experiences the food. So where the caloric and goodness piece of the puzzle speak to their health, right? So we've got these categories.
Who's fed, who's full, who's able to function.
Yeah. And so that you can do all that and just sort of like it's purely biological.
Okay.
But the beautiful function happens at the more of the soul level, right? This is like, what is my spirit? What's my morale? How well am I getting along with people? And those become more and more important through the beautiful section. And so you can't know that unless you talk to people. Like you have to know that Laban likes rosemary, or you'll never get it. And so you have to know that Tussa hates, or like it's allergic to nuts, or you know,
She'll go hungry.
Let's just put all this in here. It's awesome.
She'll be grumpier than she already is.
Yes. So those two things go together, and that's where seasonings are different than ingredients, and how they play it to different axes. The thing I haven't gone over yet, we should catch up here.
Yeah. Taught in all home economics classes. I've just learned more during this stream than any other time I've ever tried to learn cooking.
Oh, there you go.
Yay!
Hey, Emu, how's it going? You want to scroll up? I just want to see if we missed anything.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Redwall themed restaurant. I'm all on board on that.
Get pie. I wish I had pie.
Yeah, right?
Yogurt cream. Pecan pie again. Good.
UI predicting how a recipe will turn out by those 5-sided diagrams. Yeah.
Yes. That's part of the
I would
UI
definitely
thing.
like to see that. And then we're back up to they actually did make sausage.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so far that gets us here. What I haven't covered yet is heat. Heat's role in both the beautiful and in the true is that heat transforms food from basic. The easiest thing is to understand it from raw to done, but then to overdone. And so if I can draw things here, I guess I have a little bit of a chart. Every food will have essentially a chart that it goes from raw up some curve to done, and then off some curve to overdone.
Okay.
You know, somewhere in here is the sweet spot. Down here is it's like raw-ish, and down here I'm like burnt, and then over here it's inedible.
Okay, so like inedible, I can eat it, but that ain't good. This is the best place to be. Still, I can eat it, and then down here, like this is just charcoal.
Yes, this is not. Yes, exactly.
Cool.
And then we have all the variety in the world here. So the chart might be, say, like a carrot. I can eat it raw, and it kind of falls off. You know, other things like I don't know what. Probably there's not much like this, but if imagine there's a thing like I like really up until this, it's no good, but then really it's pretty impossible to burn. You could do that. The math supports it all, and we can have that could be unique. So what happens is that basically I pick how hot and how long, and that creates basically how much energy goes into this. So if this is the horizontal, the vertical is how quickly I change that based on kind of like how much heat has been added to this ingredient. And given I have water, soup, and milk in this thing, they will each go across their own charts at a different rate. But how much heat I add is going to be here. How much time I do is here. Wherever that spot is how far I got on each food.
So if we start getting more complicated cooking, am I going to have to put things like the onions in first to saute them before I add?
Yes, you do.
Sweet.
That's exactly right. And so timing becomes a factor, right? You also have to do it in steps. So how I would make spaghetti, for example, is I start with water and dry pasta, and water has zero salt. Pasta has a little bit of salt, but not much. To do it right, I need to add salt to the water. Salt is the only seasoning that we treat as a raw ingredient because it's sort of a core feature. But I add salt to the water, I add pasta to the water, I add heat, and now I get noodles. I can certainly burn the noodles. I can make them al dente. So I have all this room in between. And then I would use a tool that we're going to call a strainer. So once I'm done with that, what comes out the backside is salty pasta water, basically, like some name of it. But that's basically, this is the thing that's in your pot. And then I would use another tool, a colander, to draw all the water out of it. And so we add gear that you can get at certain hearths or in certain chests that do single functions to your food. And so you might have, you might need, for example, a skillet if you want to cook it a certain way at a certain temperature. You might need a colander to drain water. You might need a mortar and pestle to grind a thing. So we have these tools that will transform ingredients. So with going back to spaghetti, if I've got my salty pasta water and I pull out the water through a strainer, now I have done pasta, which has more salt than it started with, more water than it started with, but it's just done noodles. In a different step, I have whatever, tomato sauce, basil, oregano, mushrooms, whatever I do, I make my spaghetti sauce the same way I do everything else. And when I'm done with that, I have spaghetti sauce. Then I put those two divine ingredients into a third thing that becomes spaghetti.
All right.
So every time I do a transaction with my salt, fat, acid, heat, I wind up with a product at the end of it. That can be saved, that can be added to other recipes, that can be shared. And it's not right or wrong, it's just how I made it. So depending on the numbers you put in, maybe you like your pasta saltier than mine. And so it's not right or wrong, it's just a thing. There is this notion of, given the charts, whether it's good or not, whether you've overdone it or not, but it's totally objective. And maybe I'm going to let my pasta be saltier over here because I know that I'm about to dilute it with a bunch of unsalted tomato sauce, whatever. So it all comes together in the wash. And what happens that each time you go through a step, you get to name and save that step that you can either put into another recipe as is. So it's like crafting, right? I'm totally crafting a thing about how the math works together, and each becomes.
Feels like just a whole game on its own.
It's a whole cooking crafting game.
It'll be awesome.
And I think I've been talking a lot. So yes, you can make Doobie's food.
Yes.
Poison.
I think we can actually, as it is right now with Tessa being allergic to things, she can detect it with her nose and just doesn't eat it, and then she's hungry. So I don't think we can actually poison people so much as they will go hungry because they will refuse to eat the food.
Yeah, but I think there's a notion, like that would be an interesting mechanic later on.
Yeah,
like
that's
the idea that the system would support any kind of brewing. The same system could work with potions, right?
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
And so you can make good potions, bad potions. It would still work the same way.
People get a stomach ache and then they're really slow for the rest of the level because you undercooked the beans and now they're expanding in their poor little tummies. Who
said poison? They should get credits. Okay, so far, how are you tracking? I think I've just been talking.
It all makes sense to me, and also for real cooking, which I'm excited.
This book is fantastic. It really treated me how that all goes.
Because in case none of you know, that one of the goal points for all the recipes that are going to be lore in the game are going to be where you can make them in game, but they're also all supposed to be real recipes that you can make IRL.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually really important to me. What I think about is interesting part is in a lot of crafting games with a quote recipe, whatever shape that takes, if you do it right, you win. If you don't do it perfectly right, you lose. Right? It's totally binary, and our system doesn't do that at all. If I change, I have total freedom to alter that recipe, and some recipes are better than other recipes, and they're not good or bad. You might say this is the best cookie recipe I've ever had. You might triple star it, but it's partly objective, partly subjective. And it's not like if I change it from 1 cup of nuts to a cup and a half, I haven't destroyed it. I haven't made non-cookies. Right. I've just made different cookies. And so this system doesn't have a binary success fail. It has just the properties of your output. And I would love to see, one thing I haven't had a chance to test is whether or not we could imagine a recipe in our system and then replicate it in real life. Would it be good? And I'd love to do it that way.
The first thing, once we get this mocked up, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go make a recipe and then I'm going to go make it in real life and see
did it work? I think that'd be cool.
I have a feeling me and Coyle will just put all of the hot root in and it will be inedible to anybody else, but it'll be good. It'll be good.
Very, very cool. Okay, I talked about doneness. I talked about
drinks.
heat.
Oh, are we gonna have drinks too? I hope we have drinks.
We should do that.
Let's see.
I don't they should support drinks. I don't know why not.
It just sounds super cool, especially interaction with characters in the world. Getting a lot of classic RPG vibes. Yay, that's good. We like classic RPG vibes. there's a chance of a cookbook being released. I don't know if we have rights to
That becomes a licensing question, but that would be cool. There is a cookbook, by the way, if you haven't seen it. There's a Redwall cookbook. And part of our research is all of those recipes.
Purpose of this within the game itself, just for the fun of crafting, partly to unlock deeper conversation with other characters. That'll definitely play in.
So actually there's a whole relationship system that you can barely see the hint of it in Hilltop Camp, but there's a whole relationship system in work that allows folks to be friends or frenemies or everything in between, and so it works on a similar grid, and these things all interplay. So short answer is yes, you'll be able to buy your way into someone's heart through their best, through their favorite sandwich.
See, and they're going to be doing some gathering for us too, so we got to make sure they're, if we've been starving them, they're going to start eating the stuff they're collecting instead of relying on us to cook for them.
Yeah.
So they won't bring anything back when we send them out to forage. So
Sorry, I got nothing. Why's your mouth covered in berries? Nothing.
How prevalent are drinks in the series? I bet for sure.
Sashima, what are sausages? The wolf explained one of them. Ground barley, oats, carrot, and mushroom. Oh, so like vegan sausages.
Ooh,
Okay.
that actually sounds delicious.
I can buy
need
that. Yeah, that sounds more like haggis, like meatless haggis. Everyone talks crap about haggis. I love it.
I've never had it, but I want it because I feel like I would enjoy it.
Yeah, it's kind of like sausage plus meatloaf plus onion gravy. Jupiter characters, I'm hoping a bit further than that. Oh, I see how it's going to be.
Oh my.
We've just crossed into
Wait,
Harvest Moon territory.
I need to know which character.
Who are you romancing, JC?
I'll be really curious to see if we can make that. Make coffee.
Okay, so on coffee, fun story. I definitely looked up. There is a recipe for dandelion root coffee and how you dry and roast the dandelion roots to make coffee. So
Really?
I have I want to introduce that in Old Moss Creek as like lore, where this person's like, I'm looking for I just need a pick me up, and they're like, oh yeah, do this thing, and then I would love that to be in game.
That would be super cool.
Gather dandelions.
Just so you guys know, Sammy's also someone who constantly brings in food for the whole shop. She's like, look at this
I like
apple
food.
pie I made, right? Like, we're pretty happy about that whole thing.
Bribery works wonders.
Okay, so we talked about soup. We talked about a score that gives us a score.
Yay, they shipped the freebie Tessa. I do too. What?
They shipped it? What did you say?
they want Freebie and Tussa to be a couple.
Oh, yes.
I'm in.
I think that'd be really funny. Okay, so we've got that. Let's see. Any other questions I had? Hearts, etc. That builds up to that. Brand, this is diffusion.
Then yeah, for Cypher, with the relationship system, it doesn't always necessarily affect the outcome of the game, but it should affect the flavor of the outcome of the game, the way you experience the game, whether or not everybody likes you and is on board with you as a leader, or whether everybody hates you and this is just the worst trip of their entire lives. Even if it all sort of ends in the same place, but then you'll be judged differently, get a score based on how happy you make people.
Yeah, there's a whole scene at the end of Act 3, which is basically the people that you helped or didn't help, how you helped them, how you took care of them, and it's kind of their report card on you, and this becomes a big part of that, whether or not you took care of them. I mean, you got me here alive, great, thank you, but you beat me like a dog, that's not cool. So there comes kind of interaction. Okay, so yes, some Telltale Adventure-like vibes. Relationships matter, and frankly, if you've been playing the game already, some of the decisions you have made in the game are carrying forward. So this starts to happen. How much you handled people, and basically whether or not you were thoughtful about them. We're introducing that pretty slowly, so you probably haven't burned any bridges, but it'll matter, right? It'll matter whether or not you gave Laban his rosemary, and who wanted fish? Somebody wanted fish. Tessa wanted fish. Okay, so I told you I'd keep it relatively short. Looks like it's actually longer than I thought. So, you think any other questions, or does that help kind of understand what we're headed for with crafting? I think it does, and we hope to roll this out at least in a V1 in the Woodlander update. Not sure what the date is for there. And we'll be able to record this, right? So where he's writing down the
this will replay
Okay.
when you watch it.
Sausage rolls. By the way, baking. Let's talk a moment about frickin' baking.
Yes.
Cooking and baking are not the same planet.
True.
They're not even the same thing.
Yeah.
And this system so far works for cooking it fails on baking. Baking is chemistry.
Yeah.
Cooking is art. They have nothing in common except the raw ingredients. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't think I want to make a whole baking system. But for the moment, we cannot properly support scones. So maybe you just have to make a freaking scone, or we just have to punt. I don't know exactly. What?
Just cook scones instead of bake scones.
Well, see, but
what would you get if you cooked a scone?
Because if you still use all the math here to make the perfect dough, and then all your sugar.
The problem is leavening. Leavening and binding. Is that just pretend? Like, wave. Here's your baking magic wand.
What would be interesting is if it was through a tool, so things like baking sheet or muffin tin. Like, if just by using that tool automatically
it turned into a baking thing.
It turns into a baking thing, and then
Maybe.
all you have to do is apply heat. It's a little cheaty, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't have a solve for that. Maybe we'll just keep it simple. Maybe that's it. Although that's not usually my way.
yeah. Of course, if we are. I mean, narratively, even though I want to be able to make scones, narratively, if we are just cooking on campfires the whole time, we don't have a proper oven for baking, so it doesn't seem...
I didn't cover that. Baking, or rather, all cooking involves hearths of one kind or another, and hearths restrict what you can make.
Gotcha.
And so, for example, like the campfire at Hilltop Camp is a big soup cauldron. And so you're limited in what you can make in a soup cauldron. And so only certain sort of transactions are appropriate.
Okay.
And that same thing will happen where, when you find a pizza oven or whatever else. So certain things go with the location.
So like Camp Silver Sands, I might wander into a mole house and there's a specialized oven in there that I could make food in, but I can't make soup in that.
Exactly. And so the most likely place that will happen is in terms of how heat gets applied. And so there's a difference between baking and basting and braising. Those things change on the gear that you have, and it changes the way that heat affects the food. So that's where gear comes in, or that's where hearths come in. And a hearth includes some sort of heat element, but also that's where gear comes in. Yeah, dumplings.
Dumplings in the soup. I want dumplings. Okay,
Yes, we'll take recipe suggestions.
Yes,
That's a good
please. Actually, anybody on the Discord want to make a recipe suggestion channel? Because I will definitely draw from that. Is there legal ramifications with that?
No.
I mean, because I looked up the legality of recipes, and you can't copyright the recipe. You can only copyright the fluff around the recipe.
Yeah. So with JC, the question about how heat works is we have a measurement system for heat. Let's see here. Basically, 1 coal equals 25 degrees, and we're just using this kind of as a way to do it. Nothing starts below 150 degrees, and so 350 degrees is 8 coals. And then you decide how long it's in there at 15 minutes, in 15-minute increments, and then you just do the math. So like 1 coal for 15 minutes equals 25 heat, and so that's how you kind of move each ingredient up their chart, and so you do that. So more coals equals more heat, more time equals more heat, but I can time it. So some things cook slowly, some things cook quickly. So you have to balance those things.
Which reminds me, you should get me a measurement or point me towards wherever the Jacks and the Jills and the Whiskers, because I can make a lore item and hide that in one of the new vermin levels.
I've got a Wikipedia link for you right there.
Excellent, because then I can hide that lore item in the new levels. You guys can look for it.
Huzzah!
And then when I go to convert all of the Redwall recipes, are going to be in these nice medieval Redwall sounding terms, and then you guys can play decipher the recipe and make it at home.
Yeah. And I agree, JC. Yes, they will have our own little terminology for heat, and for, like, we use words like Jill and Whisker and stuff like this that we're trying to make it more kind of charming, and that would include heat. Yeah. As I was playing, I was surprised at Laban sniffing up Sophia. is Laban? Laban's not moving on Sophia, is he? Or he just says she smells like honey. Oh, he's such a sweetheart, though. He's nothing personal. Oh, I see. And it's Liam who's giving him grief. That's what it is. That's Liam.
He's like, are you making out my wife? He's like,
you'll back off, Laban. All right. Well, I think that's probably. I don't want to belabor this, but that's the system we're working on. This feels like like we have a UI that we have to work out, but we've been playing with the ideas, and it seems to work quite well. It seems to be very flexible. So I'm excited about that. One of these days, we need to go back and show Tittle Tattle.
Yeah.
So the cooking crafting game has an equivalent in the relationship system, which is a card game called Tittle Tattle, and people have to wager their memories as a way to like if I win, you tell me a story, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we'll go through that another time.
Which I hear that's a newer game came out, like where the water tastes like wine, and they do a similar thing.
Oh yeah.
Which, like, that means they must have been working on it around the same time.
That's okay.
But it's cool.
Like, I am comfortable knowing that we didn't copy them since I never heard of it, so we'll do our own thing. All right. In that case, have a great afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever y'all are. And let me just say, like, launch has gone really well. And we're really grateful for the folks who've backed us up, who've helped us, who've left reviews. It's been really, really cool, which means we get to keep doing it. And we get to keep expanding and growing and polishing. And that's really fun. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
You push buttons or something?
Yeah, I'm supposed to have 10.